In approximately the mid-2000s or so, every movie and its dog was about a talking dog. I mean, you had Scooby-Doo, Marmaduke, Marley and Me, the Aristocats. Basically, every movie had like this theme of it. Certainly talking animals, and usually the animals were dogs. Now, of course, the first question that probably comes to any person's mind is, where did all this start? Which philosopher or film director or poet, as the case may be, was the great innovator who first came up with this idea that you could tell a story about a dog with dialogue? The answer to this question is the great Spanish Renaissance writer Miguel de Cervantes. Miguel de Cervantes, whose novella The Dialogue of the Dogs was the first dialogue between dogs in recorded human history. That I know about. I'm sure that there could be exceptions. Certainly dogs and cats and similar had been the subject of literature before. You might be thinking of Panger Bon and various other things. But as far as this theme of especially a slightly humorous conversation taking place, in this case it's between two dogs, Cervantes seems to be the primary innovator in this field. So if you're a fan of Scooby-Doo, if you're a fan of Marmaduke, however unlikely that might be, you absolutely have Cervantes to thank. So the way this story works is it starts with like a frame story where this man, I forget his name, his name is Ensign Campuzano, excuse me. So yeah, Ensign Campuzano has just been defrauded of his wealth by a young woman who married him under the pretense of having a large dowry, when really she had no dowry, and the house that she showed him was her friend's house that she was looking after. So he gets all angry and despaired and ends up in the hospital. And while he's in the hospital, he writes the short story, The Dialogue of the Dogs. In the way it's framed, he's actually like he's showing the written version of this story to a friend of his, and he claims Campuanzo, or how do you say this? Campuzano? He claims that this is an actual account of two dogs that he overheard in the middle of the night talking to each other. Now, as you know, Cervantes is the author of Don Quixote, one of the greatest and funniest novels in human history. The Dialogue of the Dogs is, I think, absolutely hilarious. Some of the language, of course, is a little bit dense and antiquated, but to me that only increases the humor because, the whole time you're imagining a dog saying these words. And so I would really love to see like a live action, like short film adaptation of The Dialogue of the Dogs. I think it would be pretty simple to do. All you need is a couple of dogs that are willing to like sit around for a bit in the night and exchange this at times very, very philosophical, profound dialogue. I'm going to read a short passage or maybe a couple of pages of the dialogue, and just to give you a little taste of it, and you can imagine the dogs' names, by the way, are Scipio and Berganza, and so you're just going to imagine they seem kind of like older dogs having this chat. So we're kind of starting right in the middle of the dialogue. So for context, Scipio here is listening to Berganza elaborate the story of his life. And Scipio's kind of, impatient because Berganza's going on a lot of tangents and he isn't really getting to the point. So Berganza begins. As I was saying, since I spent all day sitting around, and since idleness leads to wool gathering, I went back over some Latin that stayed with me from what I had heard while I was still in class with my masters. When I found my comprehension somewhat improved by this habit, I determined, as if I already knew how to talk even then, to take advantage of this exercise whenever I could, but not as some ignoramuses do. There are those who interlaid their conversations from time to time with some brief, pithy Latin phrase, giving strangers to understand that they're great Latinists when they hardly know how to decline a noun or conjugate a verb. Scipio. That's not as bad as those who actually know Latin. Some of them are so oblivious that they'll spray it around like spit even when they're talking with a shoemaker or a seamstress. Berganza. It just shows you that anyone who speaks Latin before the clueless sins as much as those who speak it cluelessly themselves. Scipio. Another thing you ought to know is that speaking Latin doesn't keep you from being an ass. Berganza. Well, who doubts that? The reason is clear. In Roman times, everybody spoke Latin as their mother tongue, yet there must have been some morons even then. Speaking Latin didn't absolve them of stupidity. Scipio. Berganza, you old sport. It takes brains to know when to shut up in your own language and when to speak in Latin. Berganza. So it does, since you can sound like an idiot as easily in Latin as in your own language. I've known erudite boneheads and tiresome grammarians and Latin-spewing dilettantes who can effortlessly exasperate anybody, not just once, but repeatedly. Scipio. Enough already. Get on with your philosophizing. Berganza. That was it. What I just got through saying. What? All that about Latin and the vernacular, which I started and you helped me finish. Scipio. You can't call all that negativity philosophizing. So that's how it is? Keep on making excuses for this damned epidemic of slander and call it what you like. It'll have them calling us cynics, the original gossiping dogs. For crying out loud, shut up already and get on with your story. How can I continue my story if I shut up? I mean, get to the point and quit pining so many extra tales in your story that it looks like an octopus. Speak forthrightly. All this about tales just won't do. You're wrong if you think it's not rude and crude to call things by their right names, as if it weren't better, if you have to call them something, to use roundabouts and curlicues to get around the unpleasantness of hearing them described clearly. Handsome is as handsome sounds. All right then, I believe you, and as I was saying, as if it weren't enough that fate banished me from my classes and the joyful, relaxed life I spent. And Berganza goes on about his life for a bit. We'll skip some of this. It's a pretty long passage. He ends it with, still, owing to my good nature, I wanted to do right by my master since I was accepting his hospitality and eating his bread. This is always the right thing to do, not just for our famously loyal kind, but for all who serve. Scipio. Now that's what I call philosophy, Berganza, because its logic derives from plain truth and clear understanding. But go on, and don't spin out your yarn. You don't want me to say tales so endlessly. But first, I beg you to tell me, if you know what philosophy is. Though I use the word, I don't know what it means. I only know that it's supposed to be good. Scipio. Here it is in a nutshell. The expression has two Greek roots, philos and sophia. Philos means love, and sophia means science, so that philosophy means love of science, and a philosopher, a lover of science. Berganza. How wise you are, Scipio. Who the devil taught you Greek? Scipio. Berganza, you really are an idiot if you make a big deal out of this. There are things that any school child knows, and just as many people fake their way through Greek as they do Latin. Berganza. That's what I'm saying, and I only wish somebody would put those people under a wine press and squeeze out the meager trickle of their erudition, that they wouldn't keep dazzling the world with the glitter of their broken Greek and false Latin, as the Portuguese dazzle of the Guinea men. Now, Berganza, bite your tongue, and I should make a meal of mine, because all we're doing is gossiping again. Yes, but at least I'm not obliged to do what I heard that somebody called the Coronatus did, Tyrian, who made a law that on penalty of death nobody should enter his city's forum armed. Forgetting this, one day he entered the council chambers wearing his broadsword. Okay, and so they go on peddling nonsense. Berganza proceeds just a page later to actually use Latin, and of course Scipio gives him all kinds of shit for that. Absolutely a brilliant story. It's like, I don't know how many pages we just read, 3 to 5, and barely learned anything about Berganza's life, which is apparently the subject of their dialogue. So anyway, that was just a little taste of this little novella is what it is. I'm basically making this video for no other reason than to recommend it to you, and hopefully now that you've gotten a taste of, one of the more amusing passages and gotten some of the context of the story, it should be pretty accessible. I'm sure there's, audiobooks and PDFs online, or else this edition from Melville House Classics, translated by David Kepin, that I was reading from. I found it for $6. It's probably pretty affordable. I think it's a great thing to read if you want a taste of Cervantes and his humor and his writing without necessarily having to delve all the way into Don Quixote, although that's also something that I'm very much looking forward to doing sometime in the next year or two. With that out of the way, thank you for listening all the way to the end. Subscribe for more videos about literature, and I hope you have a wonderful day.